Hi everyone, welcome to episode 10 of the Culture Books podcast. It is the 26th of May 2022 and I am Sheridan. I'm joined in the pod by...
Hello, my name is John.
How are you today, John?
I'm all right.
Right, so what are we up? We're up to chapter 10.
The command system,
Command system.
Batholith.
And...
What's a Batholith, Sheridan?
Oh, I don't know. It must be a ship.
I think it's an underground rock.
Right, okay.
Which is the thing the command system's been built into.
Right.
Yes, this is on Schar's world, the planet of the dead, but maybe we should catch people up to where we're up to.
We should.
And how are we going to do that?
We're going to do that by timing you, and I'm going to count you in, and you're going to press start on 1.
How long have I got?
You have 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
3, 2, 1.
So there's a war in space between giant lizards, the Adirans, and the computers that humans have made, but now the computers run the show. That's the culture. And a culture mind, a great artificial intelligence, and a very young one has been lost, and it's on this planet of the dead, and the Adirans have sent their agent, a changer called Horza, to go and try and retrieve this thing, because he's got history on the planet, so he'll be allowed in. And he's got a ragtag back bunch of mercenaries, and they finally got on the planet, and his girlfriend's been murdered by his side.
That was a very... I don't know if anyone heard the dramaticness of Roger kicking a beer can off the desk.
Yes, Roger the cat kicking a beer
now
can off the desk. Not just some random person called Roger in the room kicking beer cans off the desk, which would be quite aggressive.
So anyway,
somehow the cat gets away with it, but, you know, if a person did that, we'd ask them to leave.
Well done.
Thanks.
All right, so now I've got to do the summary.
Okay, so you're going to give the summary of Chapter 10, the command system, Batholith, and the sub-chapter at the end of it, which I think is State of Play 4 or something.
It is maybe State of Play 3, I think.
Okay. Okay, so your 30 seconds starts in 3, 2, 1...
Horse is trying to convince everyone to get back into the command system so he can find the mind. They're kind of like being a bit annoying about it because they don't really want to go, probably because he's kind of BSing them about the whole situation. They eventually go in. He takes everyone, including Belvader. They come across a Magil who tries to kill them, and then the Magil gets shot and falls down a 10-kilometre pit. And then they just sort of continue on their way. The state of play is... that chick whose name's just, like, really escaping me right now. Like, she... Fazal Nugrul. Fal Nugrul. Sorry. It's a whole lot of pressure. Fal Nagestra. God.
But just Fal. It's a simple name.
Yeah, I know. I was like, it's a lot of very pressure. You're under a lot of pressure.
Okay. Do you want to quickly tell us what you think happens in State of Play before we then talk about the whole chapter?
Well, she's kind of meditating on the problem of Horza, but in doing so, she starts to... have a lot of thoughts about who she is as a person and where she fits into the world and where all the different races and species fit in, and it's pretty intense and deep.
Okay.
She climbs up a mountain again.
Which is what she likes doing.
She seems to really like doing that.
Yeah. So the chapter opens with another description of the command system, which the more it gets described, the more complicated and mind-bending it seems. And I hope Ian M. Banks had some sort of diagram of it to try and write the story off it, because even having read this book several times, at best, there's some train tracks and a lot of action happening, and I'm a bit confused beyond that.
And it seems really big.
Yeah, it is extremely huge, yeah.
And, like, what way does it go? Is it big going down, big going across?
Well,
seems
it's trains,
both.
so they don't go up and down much once you get 5 kilometres deep.
Yeah, but when the Medjol falls down the 10-kilometre tunnel...
Yeah. Okay, but that's from where the entrance is... Then it's 5 kilometres down to where the train is. And then the train runs horizontally in a loop from there. And then there's another shaft going down another 5 kilometres just to more service stuff at the bottom. But
what's coming off all of that 5 kilometres?
Nothing. That was just a loop so that they could move the trains around to avoid nuclear weapons.
I'm confused. Anyway, It's big.
Yes. So the idea was that the people who built it wanted a mobile command system so that it would be very hard for their enemies to wipe them out with nuclear weapons. That's why they built this huge train system into the rocks.
Yep.
The rock, the Batholith, rock. Yes. And in fact, the opening of the chapter tells us what a Batholith is. It's called a Batholith, a granitic intrusion which rose up like a molten bubble into the sedimentary and metamorphic rocks already here 100 million years ago. There you go.
There you go.
And we get a little bit more of how living with the Drazon worked and why there were even any people allowed on the planet of the dead. So the Galactic Federations had allowed settlement so that travellers in distress could land on these planets and get fixed up and sent on their way. There is a little description, though, of Horza playing in the command system as a younger changer, noting that, however, nobody's ever taken unscrambled recordings of any sort out of the tunnels. So the Drazon sort of seems very hands-off, except when people are kind of crossing a boundary for it, and then it gets extremely hands-on to the point of scrambling a recording, just one recording.
I know, I couldn't really work out what it sounds like this would be a boring recording of people doing their train
it just
work.
doesn't want people seeing the trains on its planet of the dead. Yeah, it's train set, doesn't want to share.
It's like a little old man in a basement with a model train kit and he doesn't want a kid to play with.
Well, exactly. So the chapter opens with Horza trying to explain the setting, to the rest of Craiklin's Free Company, in the hope of convincing them to get involved. So this sort of zoomed a bit over your head, Sheridan?
What do you mean? It zoomed a bit over my head? What do you mean?
As in the description of what's going on here.
No. When he's trying to convince everyone to go.
Okay, yep.
No, it didn't zoom over my head, but I just felt like there's a lot of arguing, and clearly he's not being entirely honest.
What do you think he's lying about?
Well, for one, he's lying about the Addirans. He's not being fully honest about the situation because he's worried about them. And so, and even though he's on their side...
I think he's changing his views on them as he's having these discussions as well, though.
Possibly.
Because, he's literally just found his ex-girlfriend murdered by the Addirans.
Well, he does say he thinks that they've been murdered by a more extremist end of the Addiran... what would you call it?
Culture,
yeah.
Society. Let's say society.
Yeah.
Let's not mix up cultures.
Yeah, I was going to say, it does confuse you.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't think that his mate would have done it. Zoralundra, yeah. So you are
I feel at this point like he's starting to make excuses for Addirans, because he's kind of pitched his future to the Addiran cause, and obviously when he's worked with the Addirans who want to handle a change, that's all been very enjoyable for him. But now his girlfriend's dead, and he's like, well, obviously I can't trust all of them. But he's starting to break Addiran society up in his mind into the bits that he can actually even deal with, and the bits that just hate him because he's not an Addiran.
Having just come out of an election in Australia over the weekend, it does start to make you think it's a little bit like factional political warfare with the Addirans, that you've got these kind of extremist end, and then you've got more moderates.
Well, you've always got factions.
Yeah.
And, groupings and alignments.
Just seem particularly relevant.
Yeah. Now, Horza's arguments with the drone Unaha Closp continue.
That drone is really irritating.
You think? Okay. Unaha Closp say, well, I don't see why I have to go, and Horza's saying, because I don't trust you on board here either. Besides, I want you to carry stuff. And then we have a lot of quite comic effect in this of the poor drone, because it can levitate, being loaded down with a pallet and forced to carry everyone's stuff around. Which I wouldn't like, being forced to carry everyone's stuff around. When they've all got anti-gravity rigs on their suits, why don't they carry their stuff?
Yeah. Except for Balvada, who doesn't have any.
Balvada's not allowed to.
Not allowed to have one, so Horza has to carry her.
I thought that was a bit romantic.
Oh, you think there's going to be a romance between the two of them?
Well, I know what's going to happen, but the idea of Horza sort of holding her tight as they went down the... you asked me a question about the future. And then there's a very realistic moment with Abijah saying, they've killed 4 of your own people already, and you think there's somewhere inside these tunnels wandering about, and they're supposed to be about the best ground troops in the galaxy, and you want to send us up against them? So, a real moment of self-reflection in Craiklin's Free Company that they're not quite ready to take on the best ground troops in the galaxy. Yeah. Did you have any other thoughts about this opening sequence there?
No, I mean, I feel like Yeltsin is a little bit too trusting of him, to be honest. And she's not a very particularly well-developed character in some ways.
Okay.
Because, I mean, she knows that he's had this previous relationship, which, I mean, I guess why should she be upset about it? It was in the past and this person's dead, but she kind of makes these sort of inquiries about it, but doesn't interrogate his response at all, and just sort of seems to be going along with him a little bit too freely, given that he has revealed stuff to her that he hasn't revealed to the others.
Yep.
And she's just not, I don't know, like I just don't think he could be possibly that good in bed. Because he's just like, he clearly doesn't really seem to want a long-term thing with her. It is a relationship of convenience, and she does kind of get strung along by him a little bit. It's not always logical.
She must have had some attraction to him right from the start, though.
Yeah, but, you know...
yeah.
Like, she must be thinking in her own mind, where's this going?
Yep. Yep, okay. Well,
like, she's not going to get much out of it. He's just going to get the mind and stuff, bugger off.
Yeah, we will have to see how that develops. I would say in this opening bit there is a bit of introduction of wiggle room in that the Adirans have been messed up crossing the quiet barrier just enough. Like, yeah, their electronics has been fried.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's examining the Medjol suit. And it's always, you know, some things are working, some things aren't. And you never quite... And obviously, they've looted quite a bit of... equipment from the changers who were on the station, but it's a little bit twee, I guess, to me that they've still been able to get through the quiet barrier and land, but they've just been debuffed to some extent for the point of story.
Yeah.
Because if they were a squad of Adirans,
yeah, they'd be stuffed. Like he wouldn't be. But it's also, I mean, it is a little bit. There's something going on that's a bit funny because it's like, well...
Oh, there's a lot of things going on that are a bit funny.
The Adirans are in there trying to get the mind.
Yeah.
And Hawes trying to get the mind for the Adirans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but these Adirans don't know that a shapeshifter and a bunch of humans are being sent to help them.
Yeah, but then why does he continue to pursue the mind if he's like, well, maybe I should just let them... I feel like maybe they should just, like, wait it out at the surface.
Wait until the Adirans emerge.
Yeah, and be like, did you get it? Cool, guys, I'm your friend, but
and we've got a ship? Yeah. And you're going to need it? What are you going to do with this mind now you've got it?
Or maybe, like, try and get, like, the comms system back up or something so they can, like, communicate with them from afar.
He is trying to get the comms systems working again. That is
I will agree
consistent part of this chapter. Yeah.
But, yeah, they're also going deeper. It's like, well... Maybe you should just, like, try and get the comm system going and communicate with them rather than trying to actually go and make contact with them, because I don't think it's going to work out real well for all y'all.
Yes.
I accept it's not a very exciting book, though. It's just Hawser and the company waited on the surface for 55 days.
Then they send an email. And then we have a little bit more pining over his girlfriend, which did have a beautiful little line here of each moment he stopped concentrating on what he was looking at or supposed to be thinking about. He saw a hard and frozen face at right angles to the body it was attached to, with frost on the eyelashes. And also he's piled his dead changes up by the doorway on the basis that they won't decompose in the cold.
Yeah.
And then they can take them away on the clear air turbulence later. What do you think of... Finally, he seems to have come on board with your thoughts on last chapter about Belveda.
What, that she is going to screw them over?
Well, that he needs to keep her close.
He absolutely needs to keep her close. The others do seem to like her as the increasing issue he's got going.
Yeah, I mean, she certainly is getting away with contradicting him a lot as well, which... but then that's kind of works for him in that as long as he can laugh off what she's saying and explain why she's wrong, he looks the bigger, nicer person out of to the group. So she's serving some purpose there. And then, there's a nice bit describing the motivations that, Woobsland's face had shown signs of interest when Hawser described the command system, and the Changer guessed the engineer found the whole idea of this gigantic train set fascinating.
I didn't realise they'd actually called it a train set. That
Yeah.
must have been what made me. Was a bit in the back of my mind.
There is an interesting little bit of Hawser, once again misunderstanding drones and artificial intelligence, where he says, Hawser wasn't worried about the machine Unaha Closp. It would do as it was told, like machines always did. Only the culture let them get so fancy, they really did seem to have wills of their own. It seems like a misunderestimation.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, the machines are... Well, I mean, when we get to the state of play section, clearly they're the most significant, powerful force in the...
Yeah, and Hawser's still got this idea that, they just do what they're told.
Do you think it's because, like, maybe does the culture not reveal the capabilities of the machines that they've created?
I don't think they reveal the exact capabilities, and partly that's because humanoids are incapable of even comprehending them.
I mean, the mind's a machine.
Yeah.
So he does have some idea about their significance.
Yeah, I mean, he has bet everything on the Adirans being able to beat them, though.
Yeah, true.
So there's probably a bit of self-delusion going on there. And then this section ends up with, easy in, easy out, Yeltsin said. She smiled, shrugged, and looking around the others. What the fuck? It's something to do, isn't it? Nobody disagreed.
That's what I mean. Like, she just seems to sort of go along with things a little bit too easily. Because at this point, wouldn't you be like, hang on a second. This is kind of our ship, Hawser, not yours. Maybe we should screw you off and just go looting stuff like we were before.
He has promised them, and it's reasonably credible, that if they can get this mine, they will get a huge payoff from the Adirans. So this
freaking risky.
This is the best score going. Yeah, but compared to everything else they've done, trying to loot mega ships on doomed orbitals and, raiding temples in jungles, this doesn't actually seem that much worse on the face of it. They've certainly been willing to see their comrades killed in large numbers before.
Yeah.
And then Yeltsin decides she needs to know, did you love her?
I know, it's just such a cliche though. And he's like, we were friends. Which is a lie.
Well, no, he says maybe once, which I think is...
But they were definitely not just friends.
Yeah, he didn't say they were friends, though. He said maybe once a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty honest.
True.
I mean, he did leave her as well. He didn't love her so much that... what was it? Bright Lights, Interesting Places. Bright Lights, Interesting People. Now, here comes Hawser's crisis of faith, where he says, perhaps Balvader wouldn't have understood, but there were Adirans and Adirans. Zaralandra was a friend and a kind, humane officer. He supposed the old Quirl would be considered more moderate, and Hawser knew others in the military and diplomatic missions whom he liked. But there were Adirans who were real fanatics, who despised all other species. Zorolandra would not have murdered the Changers. It would have been unnecessary and inelegant. But then you didn't send moderates on missions like this. You sent fanatics or a Changer. And to me, this is quite a big step that Hawser's starting to split the Adirans out in his mind between the ones he can work with and the ones he can't. And I think it's the murder of his fellow Changers that's actually started to change his thinking there.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is talk throughout the chapter of whether he will actually enact revenge if he comes across the Adirans that did it. He says his major focus is getting the mind, but there is an implied or a possibility that he might actually be like, well, if I get the opportunity, I will be vengeful for my fellow Changers.
Yeah, so it's... like I said, I think it's quite something has broken in the back of his mind with his, ex-girlfriend being killed. And,
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but this does get expanded upon in the, why do I keep forgetting the name of the state of play? I keep forgetting what they call those subchapters. That the Adirans are actually kind of a bit like Aryan Brotherhood, where they're like, we are a pure race that
We are perfect.
Yeah.
We will get to that in a...
Yeah, I know, but I don't feel like that has actually come up before, that the Adherents have this purity ideology in there.
Yeah, I think that subchapter, I mean, it's literally canonical. There are wiki pages devoted to expanding it. Anytime anyone's trying to explain the culture to other people, that's sort of the passage they reference. It's really important.
There is a lot in it, but we'll get to it. But
and so then they get in the fight with the Medjol that's crawled its way up the
poor little Medjol.
the access tunnel. Yeah.
I like the bit where he's like, you see, I saw fingers coming over.
But they do have multiple hands, so even with two hands holding onto the ledge, there was one waiting to shoot him.
He knew. Horza knew.
Yeah.
I mean, he tries to convince it that he's on his side, which... It's interesting because obviously the Medjol only take command from
their adherents.
So even though he tried to make out he was a friend or an ally, the Medjol wasn't willing to.
If I was a Medjol and I had orders and some random humanoid starts trying to convince me that I'm not a threat and it shouldn't kill me, I don't think I'd be listening to it.
Yeah, but it is in a state of real distress.
Yeah.
So it's gone, I'm just going to try and fight my way out of this pretty impossible situation.
Yeah, I mean, they're warriors. They're built to fight. The description of the Medjol's end was quite touching, I thought. Horza went back to the tall, buckled, pitted doors of the lift shaft and looked down. With the magnifier up full, he could just make out a tiny sparkling deep, deep below. The helmet's external mics picked up a noise, but from so far away and so full of echoes that it sounded like nothing more than the wind starting to moan through a fence. And that's as this Medjol's falling through 10 kilometres of shaft below. Which would be quite dangerous, I would have thought, to look down there when an armed thing is falling and could just aim back straight up the shaft. But, yeah.
And he looks away. Isn't there a line that he turns away? It's like indicating he can't really bear to look at it.
That's maybe at a different stage. That's not here.
Apologies.
So then they finally start heading down the shaft. And there's an interesting little line here of just a turn of phrase that I've heard a few other times in different settings, but where the drone is complaining about carrying things, and Horza says, "You drop any of that stuff down that shaft and you'd be as well to follow it, machine." I remember hearing a famous story in the Navy when a new chaplain was trying to throw the sailors' pornography overboard and had to have it explained to him that if he threw it overboard, he'd be following it. So this turn of phrase has been used a few times at least. But what did you think of Balvader's little tete-a-tete with Horza as they cling on to each other descending through the shaft?
Or when she says that if she falls down the shaft, she wants him to shoot her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because she doesn't really show a lot of weakness, but clearly this idea of falling 10 kilometres was way too terrifying for her.
Yeah, I mean, they really bring it out here. You know, they dropped into the chill-stone silence of the tunnel's black throat, clasped like lovers. So the language there, it's definitely, there was some romance to it. And then Horza starts making excuses. The Adherents have tried to start things up in the wrong order and wrecked things, and it's all getting very complicated down there. I mean, what's your sense of this part of the expedition?
Well, it doesn't feel like it's going well.
Well, they killed the first Medjol they encountered, so, they, hooray, overcome adversity.
But that Medjol was clearly, it's got others. There's something, it's come from somewhere.
It's also a bit of video game logic. They've beaten a minion, but there's bosses.
They didn't feel like that. And it wasn't particularly well armed. Its suit was a bit messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel as though it's quite foreboding. But, it's been like that for a few chapters now.
Yeah, I did like, the bit that comes up where Horza's like, Horza was wondering whether they should split up. And for us in 2022, we've grown up with never split up, never walk backwards in the dark.
I mean, to be fair though, when these bloody, they're like 25k tunnels and stuff.
Yeah.
So I would have thought splitting up might be sensible, but...
In terms of covering twice as much
Yeah.
ground. Yeah, but they've only got
Depends
one...
how long they're there and how much food they've got, I guess.
They've only got one mass detector. And they're not really going to find this mind without using that. So, I think there is something to be said with staying together, as well as, not getting picked off in detail by the Adirans. And I did love the description of it was like being set a cunning but unlikely problem in one of the Habar Military Academy's term exams.
Yeah, that was a good line.
And that brings us pretty much to the end of this. They're literally trying to go to sleep and ghosts are chasing him. And it all sounds very complicated, even trying to go to sleep with having to wait till everyone settles down and then set your motion detector up on an alarm and hope that none of them are going to sneak up on you or none of the Adirans are going to sneak up on everyone.
What's the significance of the noise that he hears at the end of his dream? It's like, ee!
I don't know.
It's just a strange noise. I was like...
Isn't that the sound the Medjol made when it fell?
I don't believe so.
Okay, we're going to take a little break before we get into State of Play 3. So, we've got a new whiskey for our recording, Sheridan.
Woo! I just took a sip.
Mm.
What is that, by the way, with the first sip of whiskey? Is that meant to be enjoyable? Because I always find the first sip a little bit confronting, and then I find it enjoyable.
When your whole spine starts cramping up.
And you're like,
yeah, that's your body saying, help, I'm being poisoned by this vile alcohol. Yeah, when that stops happening, you're an alcoholic. What are we drinking?
We're drinking... Oh, God, I can't say that. Auchentoshan.
Okay, it's pronounced Auchentoshan.
Auchentoshan?
Mm-hmm.
Is it German?
No.
Is it Irish?
No.
These are very bad accents.
They all sound Pakistani.
They were not meant to be that. That is...
Every Australian trying to do an accent ends up sounding Pakistani.
Do you think?
Yeah. So it's Auchentoshan, which is from Glasgow.
Oh, Glasgow.
It is a relatively rare beast because all the press about whiskey to the uninitiated whiskey drinkers about Highland whiskies, and maybe if you know a bit about it, you might start talking about Island whiskies. But this is a lowland whiskey.
Well, I was going to say, Glasgow's a very grim city.
It's very beautiful in parts. But yeah, I mean, it's quite cold.
No Edinburgh.
Yeah. Whoa! Oh! Fighting words. You know we've got a lot of Scottish listeners, don't you?
Look, I mean, to be fair, I have to say I spent one evening in Glasgow, so I can't really judge it. But Edinburgh is a very pretty city.
Look, I will acknowledge that tourists to
Also
Scotland are much more likely to go to Edinburgh than...
And I actually experienced lots of Scotland, including right out into Orkney Islands, so I feel as though...
Alright, so Auchentoshan is a triple distilled whiskey, which is also very unusual. And this one has been matured in bourbon and sherry casks.
Ooh.
And so for it was $77 Australian for the bottle. It's quite a bargain for what is, this is distributed by Suntory. It's not like it's that rare or special, but it's still a little bit off the beaten track, at least in Australia. So what do you think of it, Sharon?
I think it's quite tasty. It says that it has notes of almond and lime. I'm not feeling those almond vibes.
You're not feeling... Oh, really?
I don't think so. I'll have to tell you by the end.
To me, it mostly tastes of whiskey, to be honest. I think I can just pick up some almond. I've always thought with Auchentoshan that the triple distilling, it's not the strongest flavour and it's not the ball-tearing, salty peatiness of the Islay malts. But that can mean it's actually a very pleasant whiskey for people who haven't gotten into whiskies yet.
I would agree with you on that.
Mm.
It's quite easy to drink. You can have a decent sized sip.
Yeah.
Without feeling like you're going to breathe fire on someone.
Yeah. So on that level, if you haven't really got into whiskies yet, I would actually say this is one of the ones to start with. Having said that, I had some with soda water earlier tonight. That was delicious. We're having it neat with a single very small ice cube, which melts very quickly.
It's a very pretty colour, I will say,
It's
as
very.
well.
I mean, it's part of the triple distilled. It's very light. Yeah, it's just a touch of caramel in the colour, but it's a lovely drop, and I do quite highly recommend it. So that's the Auchentoshan.
Auchentoshan?
Sorry, that's so spelt Auchentoshan. If you're looking for it in the stores, and distributed by Suntory, so it's going to be everywhere. Any decent Scotch shop you go into the world will have one of theirs. Okay, so that's the house whiskey for the next few episodes, in honour of Ian M. Banks's love of whiskey. So let's talk now about State of Play 3, where we rejoin Fal Nagistra on top of a mountain where she likes most. She's struggling with her broken leg again, but it seems to be healing up. And what did you think of this bit, Sheridan?
Of her climbing the mountain, or just the whole chapter?
Yeah, I mean, to me, one of the key bits is she's up there on the mountain, she's thinking about things, and then she says to herself, well, it was done. Those people in the culture who had really objected to the war were gone. They were no longer culture. They were not part of the effort. They had become neutrals, formed their own groupings, and taken new names, or claimed to be the real true culture, yet another shading of confusion along the culture's inchoate boundaries. But for once the names did not matter. What mattered was the disagreement and the ill-feeling produced by the split. And I could feel every community meeting that I've ever been in.
I was going to say that, because I've already referenced that we had an election there, like the Teal Independents, which for our overseas listeners are a group of basically liberal or traditionally conservative party members.
Yeah, let's not try and explain modern Australian politics to an international audience.
That just believe that there should be action on climate change, so they've gone off into splintered.
Yeah, splintered from the Greens and the Liberals, I guess.
From the Liberals.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
But I did like this feeling of everyone disagreeing with everyone going off and doing their own thing. And
it does, and I must say this chapter really reveals, a significant amount of nuance in the politics of all of the different, tribes or factions, however you describe them, because you start the book out just thinking, well, it's just adherence and culture.
Yeah.
The changes seem to be, a kind of neutral force.
And changes aren't a force, they're an irrelevance. But
and, there's some humanoids that also are kind of irrelevant, but it's just primarily these two warring groups. But then this chapter really reveals that it's a much more complicated situation than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you think of something the size of just the Vavat Orbital alone could encapsulate every empire that's ever existed on this planet, and that was just one ring in space. And it was interesting because you were looking for this passage before we started, and I had actually highlighted it when I read it, where Fal's describing to herself a federated disgust, a galaxy of scorn. Us with our busy little lives, finding no better way to pass our years than in competitive disdain. Talking about all the groups sort of hating on each other. Yeah,
she's really starting to, I guess, take issue with this fighting and trying to think about, well, what does it actually mean and where is it getting anybody? And she seems to be really starting to want to meditate on that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think we'll get by the time we get to the end of this, she does actually resolve it in a really strong way. But there is this great description of the Adherents, just the widening the scope on them, that they're fundamentally near perfect beings, but they're hanging on to everything that makes them perfect, and thus they're incapable of change, and in fact fanatically opposed to change. And, that brings us to all sorts of ideas about political conservatism, which is mostly about entrenching privilege, and certainly I think the Adherents are very keen to entrench Adherent privilege. But, and then, the culture, she's describing here as, and us, just another belch in the darkness.
I love that line.
Sound, but not a word, noise without meaning.
And, describing them as a mongrel race.
Yeah. Do you want to read that passage? Because this is absolutely key to any discussion of what the culture is and where it came from. References this paragraph.
We are a mongrel race, our past a history of tangles, our sources obscure, our rowdy upbringing full of greedy, short-sighted empires and cruel, wasteful diasporas. Our ancestors were the lost and found of the galaxy, continually breeding and milling and killing, their societies and civilizations forever falling apart and reforming. There had to be something wrong with us, something mutant in the system, something too quick and nervous and frantic for our own good or anybody else's. We are such pathetic fleshy things, so short-lived, swarming and confused, and dull, just so stupid to an Adiran.
What I actually took from this is a defense of multiculturalism versus racial purity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's a muscular interpretation of multiculturalism as something that actually creates strength through its diversity is a message I think we don't want to get away from or lose in these times.
When I started reviewing or analysing or whatever it is I do on this podcast,
yeah,
speaking crap, I thought the culture were these evil kind of Nazis.
Yeah. No, you've been set up by Ian Banks to go through this journey.
Set up. But do I believe it though? Because this is just Fal's view.
It is Fal's view.
So I'm not seeing that, maybe Zora Lundra would have a very different perspective to me. Mm-hmm. So,
I'm sure Zora Lundra would have a different perspective to you. Does the Adiran Spy Master have a
different to a humanoid that can only listen to an audiobook?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely changing my view about the different cultures. It's so annoying.
Societies.
I need to get a thesaurus before I start this podcast.
That would be good. So this then sort of rolls, and there's a lot of very strong stuff. This might be one of my favourite passages in the whole book, actually. But then, as she resolves all these things she's thinking, and a lot of self-loathing and disgust and self-disgust, self-contempt, where she says, "Who are we? Who we are? Just what we're taken as being. What we know and what we do. No less or more." And then she says to herself, "And if we tamper with our inheritance, so what? What is more ours to tamper with? What makes nature more right than us? If we get it wrong, that's because we are stupid, not because the idea was bad. And if we are no longer on the breaking edge of the wave, well, too bad. Hand on the baton. Best wishes. Have fun." And I really like that concept of we are going to take responsibility for ourselves. We are going to identify what is bad, and we're going to keep trying to get better and better instead of saying we are perfection and nothing can ever change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is, to me, one of the most strong descriptions of even an attempt at progressive politics.
True, although she then does go into, doesn't she, talking about how they're quite hedonistic and that really if they can't get things right, they should try again and make their life more pleasurable.
Yeah.
Which, I've always sort of thought this about the culture has sort of been my problem, is that they're so self-centered because it's about their own pleasure and joy.
Yeah, but, we've literally got this war where the culture's put down their parties and said, okay, we're going to fight. And it's been so shocking that, this large section of the culture said, no, we're not, we're leaving the culture, or, sitting around on their island yachting trips saying, oh, well, this is a bit boring, we keep losing, maybe we should just give up. So I think that's important that they're showing that, A, they love to throw really awesome parties with dazzling spectacles, but they are capable of being serious when it matters. And that's kind of a thing more being explored. Interesting line here about Hauser and changes.
Yeah.
What are you? A weapon, a thing made to deceive and kill by the long dead. The whole species, that is the changes, is the remnant of some ancient war, a war so long gone that no one is willing to tell recalls who fought it, or when, or over what. nobody even knows whether the changes are on the winning side or not.
But I mean, he is a weapon. Like, he is literally a weapon being deployed by the Adherans.
Yeah. And every part of his being, from his, poisonous teeth to his poisonous fingernails to his ability to deceive, is to kill.
Mm.
And that must be quite tricky for a society, for change of society. I mean, you can run a society of shapeshifters. It raises some interesting problems. A lot of genetic fidelities, you imagine.
There is a line in this section as well, because, she's asking the question about what Horza is and who he thinks he is. And she says, and I'm sorry for you because I think I know now who you really hate.
Mm.
But she doesn't say who that is.
It's him, isn't it?
Well, that's the implication, but she doesn't say it, does she?
No.
Because then she comes out of the trance.
Mm.
And I was like, I want to know the answer to that. Like,
yeah. There's a really nice line here about getting old. Another failure, she thought bitterly, but it was a young, unstable sort of bitterness, a kind of fake, something she assumed for a while, like a child trying on adult clothes. She luxuriated in the feeling of being old and disillusioned for a moment, then let it drop. The mood did not fit. Time enough for the genuine version when she was old, she thought, wryly smiling at the line of hills on the far side of the plain.
I mean, there is that... Am I wrong in saying that this chapter does actually refer to her age on multiple occasions?
She's relatively young.
Yeah. Has that come up before? Or, yeah. Yeah, okay, maybe I've just not sort of acknowledged it.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the joy of the writing of this book, actually, is the way that things get unveiled here.
Mm.
And new perspectives keep being added, which is important, I think. But I think, for me, the real thing is saying we are changeable, we are agents of change. Yes, we've created these minds because we thought we could do better than ourselves. As opposed to Adherans saying we are perfect and no change is possible.
Mm.
So I've said that a few times in this podcast, but I just wanted to really hammer home that point. Sheridan, who's been your MVP?
Oh gosh. I actually was thinking about this when I was reading it and then I never made a decision.
Mm.
I think it probably does have to be Fowl. Because she's revealed so much to us.
Okay.
And, I entered this for, what are we, chapter 10? Mm-hmm. And I've been like, those cultured people, they are douchebags, but now I'm like, maybe they're cool.
Oh, she's turned you around.
She does sound like an insufferable person to invite to a dinner party, though.
I think at a dinner party she'd just pretend to be charming and smile and nod at your stupid ideas about the conduct of the war. Mm. She was moderately kind to the boy.
Mm.
Mm. Even if he kept moaning, how do I even get into contact?
Although maybe it should be that medjool that fell down that 10-kilometre shaft, because that really does sound like a crapola way to go.
It's not really an MVP, that's kind of the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah, true.
Mm. What are your predictions for next chapter, Sheridan?
Ooh. I wonder if it's going to be a bit of a sleeper chapter and them roaming around trying to find the mind.
I think there's going to be a bit of roaming around trying to find the mind. Shall we peek ahead and see what the chapter's called?
The chapter is called Command System Stations. So I reckon there might be a train involved.
Oh. Nice one. Okay, that's your prediction. Is a train involved?
I reckon there might be a train.
Mm. Do you think Horza's just going to meet up with the Adherans and they're all going to get together and play happy families?
Do not think that is going to happen at all. I mean, then what happens if he comes across the Adherans and they're like, we've got the mind, and he's not going to be like, okay, I'll take it.
Well, they're not going to hand it over to him, no.
But why would he take it? He'd be like, cool, you got it. That's why I was here.
Well, I think at that point his play would be, cool, I've got a spaceship.
Yeah, and a culture agent. Let's go.
I think they'd just pop the culture agent at that point.
You reckon?
Or the Adherans would. You
don't reckon she's got any value to them being interrogated? I mean, they kept her name the first time.
Yeah, but they also failed to hang on to her when they tried to interrogate her last time. It didn't end well for them, did it?
Yeah, no.
Okay, on that note, folks, we've seemed to have picked up some speed with the episode, so hopefully we'll be back in, if not a week, no more than a couple of weeks. Hey, I just want to say, I've noticed looking at the demographics of who's listening to this that it's not all men, but mostly men, mostly in their 40s or 50s, and a lot of them living in the British Isles. And I just wanted to say...
I'm sure you all appreciated that amazing Scottish accent there.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is, at this point, most people listening to this already love these books, and we all just really miss Ian M. Banks. And
I'm actually really disappointed this Amazon series never got up. I'm like, every time I'm like listening to the audiobook, I'm like, I can see it. Like, I can see this would make such a good show.
Yeah. Maybe Mike Cannon-Brookes as an ethical lefty billionaire can fund this one. I mean, I don't actually believe any billionaires are truly ethical or lefty, but
no.
Yeah. Okay, maybe at some point we can organise some sort of collective effort to make something. Good TV shows don't get made by.
I was about to say it's like maybe like a YouTube video.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe at some point in the distant future we'll be able to animate it, but it's going to take.
Neither of us possess any of these skills.
It might be the Ian M. Banks estate's going to have to produce its own TV show. And I would contribute significant funds to help that.
We need to actually talk about who we think would play the characters.
Okay, let's quickly do that.
I need to think on it,
Okay, well, next episode we'll touch on this. Okay, on that note, folks, thank you so much for listening, and we will be back soon.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.